Hello everyone, and welcome to RPG Horror Stories with DnD Doge. In today's episode, we have a grab bag of sorts of a bunch of shorter D&D horror stories, including a tale about a player joining a game just to not join the game. A story about a it's what my character would do type situation that actually kinda makes sense in my opinion, and much more. So, without further ado, let's dive right into these stories. Just Let Me Join the Party So We Can Move On With Our Game by Reddit user Luca Cola. I joined an ongoing campaign for a one-off with 4 other players and picked up a character that existed as an in-game outlaw to join up with another band of outlaws. Another one-off player played an established character, and I was a relative outsider. I didn't have a ton of background with the party or the environment, but I made a good effort. I listened to the party discuss how to get in and out of the city that we were in. There was some discussion about getting things in and out, basically customs issues. So I introduced myself and told them I was a connected merchant who had ways of getting goods in and out. There was some discussion about, hey, how do we trust this guy? And somehow I ended up with a blood bond with the other one-off player, which in retrospect is pretty clever as it gave me an in to the group. But one player would not let it go. I am not joking when I say we spent the next hour and a half discussing customs, what the need for smuggling actually was. They were a bit undecided. The how can we trust this guy angles, and me having to try and wedge in a reason just so my character could join the party, as one player was just way too fixated on finding a reason to trust a relative outsider. The DM even offered special concessions to my character to validate the claims that I was making. The rest of the party was on board and was vibing with a character that I wanted to come across as affable, even though, of course, the question of trust was in the air. Yet, whenever I would try to move on to discussing the next plans, this one player would just harass my character about trusting him and trying to convince the rest of the party to not let me be involved. I was essentially stonewalled by one player on joining the party for in-game reasons. We barely actually got to do anything that night, and the game quickly devolved into confused arguing about why we were debating in the first place. Some people really need to learn to accept mild contrivances for the sake of the game and its players. Yeah, that sounds like that would be a bit annoying. While I can understand wanting to roleplay distrust, there is also the underlying tone of, let's get on with it already. That player should have figured out a way that his character would go along with it. For example, like, you can come with us, but you will not leave my sight, or something like that. Then there is also the fact that the DM should have, at some point, talked above table and told the player to stop throwing a wrench into the game after like the first 30 minutes. Though, that is just my thinking. What do you all think? Let's move on. Dungeon Master fridged me for hours and killed an AFK character by Reddit user Tiago7115. This just happened to me, and I'm effing pissed. I entered this online campaign a couple of weeks ago, and it seemed really cool. The setting seemed really interesting, and I was really digging everything. The DM was a cool guy that sounded pretty invested in my character, and I was looking forward to playing. Finally, the day of the session rolls around, and I'm there, character sheet open, thinking about how my character would react to the party and how to roleplay. The session began, the party was traveling in the road, and I just kept quiet and started listening. One of the players hadn't yet entered the Discord call. Then the DM explained to me that when someone comes in late or doesn't show up and doesn't explain the reason, they roll a death save for them, and on a fail, the character just effing dies. They rolled a 6, and then he died. Simple as that. A half an hour later, the player told us on the chat that he couldn't play today, so I told him that the character had died, and he said he was just going to roll another one then. When the DM found out that he said he was going to roll another one, he said that they had finally found some good players. which implies that perhaps he did that to some other players that got pissed and left. Kinda like me. The session kept going. 1 hour. Nothing of my character showing up. The party got into a fight, and another hour went by. Still nothing. Then, at about 2 hours of session time, I found out that the party was split, and the other half would start playing now. So I was pretty hopeful, thinking that my character would join now. He didn't. The effing DM just kept going and going and going, and nothing came up of me appearing. It's not even like he forgot about me, because I unmuted myself about 3 times to comment something. And another player made a comment about, "Poor Zayden, still waiting to play." And the DM just kept going. What pisses me off is that they weren't even in a tense situation or a battle sequence. They were effing walking through the city and talking to NPCs. At this point, I was mostly muted, hopping in and out of the call, and they didn't even notice. Eventually, he just effing ended the session, and that's it. I left the server already, and I'm gonna give the DM a piece of my mind and just effing forget this night. TLDR, Effer DM kills off the character of a player who didn't show up because they were busy that day. Made me wait for 4 hours for my character introduction that never came, and then ended the session. Yeah, I agree that it's pretty messed up to have a player join a campaign and then just let them sit there for hours and not even introduce the character at any point in the session. I can understand that it may not happen right away, as the DM needs to fit it in narratively, but a creative DM can find multiple ways for that to happen. What's more is that OP later stated in the comments of the post that his character was a mercenary, so at any point during the party's trek through the town, the DM could have just had them run into his character. Then there's the whole thing about rolling 1 death save for a character whose player doesn't show up. I can understand getting upset at someone for no call no showing, but if it's not something that happens all the time, I think that is a bit extreme. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons why someone may not be able to make it to a game and not be able to notify everyone. Plus, for a DM that seems like he needs a player to show up at just the right time to fit in narratively, he sure doesn't seem to mind coming up with a random reason why a character would just up and die out of the blue. So yeah, OP leaving this game was probably for the best, because from what I read, this DM sounds like he'd be a nightmare to play with. Let's move on. The worst experience first time DMing anyone could possibly have. By Reddit user, SignificantLow726. My first time DMing anything D&D is, without a doubt, one of the worst experiences I think any DM could ever possibly have. My plotline was simple. Join a band of mercenaries to find a set of keys that unlocks a vault. It was meant to be kind of like a dungeon delving heist. I didn't require too much out of my friend's character building, other than make sure they need or want money really bad. Now, for context, I had only made 3 NPC characters for this campaign that went along with the party since they were like pretty much all spellcasters, and I didn't want to take anything away from the characters they made. However, the only one that matters here is Victoria. Victoria was a tiefling cleric who was actually meant to be a kingdom spy in the group to catch Tank. However, my mistake was unfortunately describing Victoria to be attractive. Why were these NPCs important? Well, 1, I'm a male, and I like to play male characters because I feel more comfortable trying to make their voices and relate to my character a little more. This was my first time role-playing as a female character, so off the bat, I was already a little uncomfortable with doing the voice, but I tried to give it a stab. Not even within 2 sessions, my players, who, at the time, were my only friends, devised a plan to rape Victoria, though I tried to shrug it off. I know rape jokes are bad, but I was really trying my best to shrug it off as a joke, and not let it interfere with what was going on, despite my discomfort. However, I was proven wrong. Within the same night, 2 players actually went ahead and did it. The first player used a series of spells to 1. Enter the NPC's dream, and 2. Use a spell, I don't remember which one, to convince her that she was attracted to him, and proceeded to ask me to roleplay her moaning. I refused, though I said that the two slept together, despite my massive discomfort. Then, the second player proceeded to actually rape the sleeping body. It made everyone uncomfortable, and I ended the campaign right then and there. The first player genuinely got mad at me over what happened, telling me that it was just a game, and I didn't need to take it as seriously as I did. I was a much more timid person at that time, and was slowly gaining my confidence, but in hindsight, that guy was the biggest loser I've ever effing met. Some good did come of it though, and the second player apologized and said that he did write his character to be perverted, but he felt that he crossed a line that he never should have. And the other players who went along with it did eventually apologize for making me uncomfortable. I have, however, completely cut off the first player since, and for the most part, neglect him from most of my memories of that friend group. Those guys have wildly matured since those days when we were kids, but it's wild to think about, considering that most of them are very religious today. So yeah, I don't think that a campaign can really go as bad as two players doing that kind of bullcrap on like the second session of a campaign for a first-time DM. Yeah, that is certainly a crap way for a first-time DM to experience their first time DMing. I can understand how much the pressure to appease people can be, especially when you're a kid trying to fit into a group that thinks that type of thing is edgy. Though, kudos to OP for eventually having the wherewithal to end the campaign after his friends pulled that crap. Now, it does sound like they were all kids at the time, and most of them realized how messed up it was that they took part in that. But I just hope that the other friend that OP didn't talk to again after that eventually grew out of that BS as well. Let's move on. But before we do so, I think we need a kitty palate cleanser after that previous story. So here is Simba, acting out how I'm sure we all feel at the end of a long week. I feel ya, Simba. I feel ya. Now, let's dive into the following story. DMPC shoots down every idea player characters have for invading a castle. Turns out the BBEG was apparently a moron. By Reddit user, SteelGeek2. So here's a little campaign the wife and I joined about 20 years ago. We were invited by a friend of a friend we all knew through gaming to join her homebrew rules and world. Now, I hear you cringing, but honestly, the rules were good. It was a point-based system that had good flexibility and decent balance. After reading them, I was impressed. So, we found out that every other player went with a caster-martial mix of points, so I went pure martial, and the wife went pure caster. We go for the character making, and she promptly chews us out for being disrespectful and late. Oh, she had forgotten about daylight savings. She was an hour off. Okay, great start. It was an ongoing game that we came into. In the first session, we find that we are hunting the BBEG's minions to find his hidden castle. Okay, standard stuff. We smoke the minions and find out about the hiding place, and that ends the session. She has a DMPC, but that was because they only had 3 other players before us. Okay, I guess. In the second session we're in, we polish off patrols of minions and find the castle. We are now halfway through the session. We start planning how 6 people can get past the small army, enter the castle, find the BBEG and his lieutenants, and smoke them all. Though every idea we have, her DMPC has a counter-argument. And with that, the session ends. Cue the between time. We get a call from her telling us that the other players aren't happy that we are more powerful than they are. Huh? We're not. She started us with lower points, but we specialized and they generalized. So she tells us not to spend any more points in our specializations. Ugh, whatever. Cue the following session. The clever planning continues, and by that, I mean her DMPC spends 3 hours shooting down every idea we have. We have now spent 5 hours on planning and have gotten nowhere. Something happened, though I forget what, and then suddenly the drawbridge opens, and the BBEG comes out and challenges us to group combat. So, we walk by the army. We walk past the moat that was described down to the feet of depth and distance. We get on the bridge, and we beat the hell out of the bad guys. And that was the end of the campaign. So we get invited in, with only 3 sessions left, aren't told that, and she gives us grief about spending XP when there wasn't going to be another session anyway, and waste half the time telling us what won't work, and then serves the BBEG up on a platter. To me, it sounds like this DM just couldn't account for having more players in her game, and possibly got overwhelmed. Between dealing with her other players complaining that the new players seemed more powerful than them, and that there was probably more planning amongst the party due to the new players' presence, when she was likely already railroading the original players, I think perhaps she just wanted to end the game instead of keeping it going. Or she just told the new players that the campaign was over instead of telling them that she didn't want them in her game anymore. I mean, that is the only thing that makes sense to me, as inviting new players to an ongoing game that you know is going to end soon anyway just seems a bit off. Though that is just my conspiracy theory for this story. What do you all think? And real quick before we move on, do you have a tale that you would like to see me cover on the channel? If so, you can always post it to the DnD Doge subreddit, and who knows, you may just end up seeing it in a video. Much like this following story. My first, That's What My Character Would Do. Submitted to the DnD Doge subreddit by Reddit user Scorpio83G. So, I play at a local comic and game store that also has a bar, with a Facebook group. The group is quite large, as we usually have at least 4 to 5 tables, ranging with 4 to 8 players each, depending on how many DMs are available in that day. While you can try to play with a regular group of players or a DM, it is common that you'll have someone at the table who is new to you, or even to the game, since the group's goal is to introduce new people to the game. And now, to the story of me pulling a That's What My Character Would Do. So, on that day, I came in late at the session because of other engagements. It was something that I communicated beforehand. And so, I joined a table with people I haven't played with before. The party at the moment was about to start a fight with the devil. After the first round, and the devil having been dealt some serious damage by the party, Hold Monster is terrifying when successfully cast, the DM started to introduce my player character, and my Tabaxi rogue came crawling out of the heavily wounded devil. Think Puss in Boots in Shrek 2. He had apparently been trapped inside the devil for a long time, and was holding some serious grudges against it. Yeah, my Tabaxi wanted the devil dead. The problem was that, for some reason, the party needed the blood of a titan, and our devil had a titan soul in them that could help the party in getting closer to obtaining what they needed. However, they failed to convince my player character of why he can't kill the devil. All they said was that they needed Titan's blood, but never explained what for or why the devil was needed to be spared for that. I even asked the DM if my Tabaxi knew anything from being inside the devil, and did a perception roll for it, which ultimately failed. I did meta in the open to the rest of the table, telling them that my player character is pissed off at the devil, and letting them know that he will kill the devil. During the next round of combat, some of the players tried to talk the devil into stopping the fight, but that somehow derailed into the fight coming to a stop. By that, I mean the players were talking to each other and discussing strategy with each other, not the devil, and that's what halted the game. So, after I was tired of waiting, I just said to the DM that my Tabaxi kept on attacking the devil, and it ended up dead. After all, we never went out of combat, and my Tabaxi didn't know the party, much less cared about their goals, nor did they try to stop me in any way. This, of course, led to the party failing and getting their MacGuffin. While I, the player, knew about why they needed the blood, my tabaxi did not, and so I did what my character would have done. And that was my first time sabotaging the party, and I have no regrets. P.S. Give Lucky and the rest some treats. The cat lord demands treats for all cats. Thanks, Doge. Well, I can certainly do that. Well, to be frank, I don't think I would classify this as a horror story. If you look at it in a certain way, this is a good example of what my character would do. OP didn't just go in and start murder hoboing everything. He explained to the other players above table his character's intentions and reasoning, and then acted on those. Sure, the party didn't get their MacGuffin, but this could be roleplayed as OP's character getting his revenge on the devil, and after realizing that the party needed it alive, joins the party in order to help them find another Titan soul out of thanks for saving him, and out of feeling responsible for them not getting it and wanting to help correct that action. Though that is just the way my brain is working at the moment. I would love to hear what you all think on this one. Was what OP did in this situation the wrong or right move? Let's move on to the next one. And, as it is Friday, it's time to cap off the week with a D&D glory story. Tonight's MVP, The Turkey Leg, by Reddit user Grimdark Studio. I'm running Princes of the Apocalypse with the Dragonlance setting rules laid out by Dragonlance Nexus. The party is a Minotaur fighter, a human paladin, bard and warlock, and a half-elf sorceress. They're reading the Keep of the Cult of the Crushing Wave and just started going through encounters. The paladin and sorceress snuck up into the ramparts to peer through the windows down into the Great Hall and saw the werebore, Grimjaw, his 2 Crushing Wave Reavers, and his sorcerer, and made a plan of attack. The bard was watching the guard they'd knocked out to get in, since her player was going to be late to the session. But the Minotaur, Paladin, and Warlock stormed into the room to attack the Reavers and Sorcerer. From her vantage point at the window, the Sorceress cast Madden Object on the turkey leg that the werebore had been in the middle of eating when they burst in. Said leg then became a sentient object with 3 HP, its own initiative, and the ability to do 1d6 plus 2 damage. It proceeded to thwack the unfortunate werebore once each turn, and then, by sheer luck, got the killing stroke. The turkey leg lodged itself in the werebore's throat, at which point it promptly choked and expired, to the great amusement of all. God, I love it when my players get this creative. Well, that is one way to deal with an enemy. It's stuff like this that is why I love this game so much. There are so many creative ways a party can deal with a situation, and just when you think you've heard it all, here comes death by a sentient turkey leg. I'll tell you what though, I'm going to be a bit more careful when I get a turkey leg at the Ren Fair this year. But that will do it for today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may your food not try to kill you. Until next time.